Hey everyone. So, I wanted to come on and talk about some of what I've learned about why business is different for entrepreneurs. Okay? So, yeah, there's an interesting story. Like, for me, I started finding my way to doing what I do now in 2008. And this was after I had been running my own marketing firm, marketing, branding, web development, and we had done that over the dot-com like big boom. And so by 2008, we hit the second recession and I was done. But here's what's bigger. I was done because marketing is so natural to me, and I felt like there was something else for me to discover. And so I went on a journey. Like, I literally had no idea what I was figuring out. And I want you guys to remember, like 2008, like it was the early days of Facebook. Twitter was really, really hot about that time. Websites still hadn't been standardized. It was like a big time of like crazy stuff happening in websites. Flash was like a big website builder at that time. It was so completely different. Well, you couldn't search the internet and find the things you wanted back then. So if I wanted to find some sort of energy healer or energy worker or tarot reader or astrologer, like they were not online. It was still like, we don't want to be online. This was the time of people learning to blog and send emails and have RSS readers. Like that's what was going on back then. I know it feels like ancient, but at that time, I didn't have access to a whole lot of spiritual materials, and I already knew I had a leaning towards what I call intuitives. So I tend to refer to anybody who has spidey senses of some kind as intuitives. And I was already like tapped into that local crowd in the Austin area. But anything beyond that I didn't. And generally, I took on projects. I stayed solo and I still took on the same kinds of projects, but little by little was discovering where I was leaning. And it was a discovery. Like learning to be a spiritual entrepreneur was not a thing. I leaned towards coaching. I went to some coaching calls. I went to some coaching federation gatherings and met people there. And that was like the closest I could get to something that felt more correct for me. I did not consider myself intuitive back then. I was on a very like spiritual path because I had multiple instances where I had somebody that was doing some healing work for my kids that was telling me that my great grandmother was present or that my grandmother was present, and they were in a way, by wanting to help, they were interfering with their health. Like I went through a lot of stuff, and I was I've always been willing to look for the non-traditional or non-physical possibility. I owned a historic building with my partner of the time, and that building had such a hard time getting going with tenants. We did energy clearings, we did building clearings. I had people who told me who had died in the building. I mean, I literally, and at that time, let me take you back. Like, for those of you who don't know, it was like a really big deal on TV at the time for like shows that had to do with the paranormal or with ghosts. Medium was big at the time. Like this was all like, woo, and people didn't talk about it. And there were certainly no conversations about it as a career, nowhere. Even though I could find them if I really looked, and ultimately would find people. So I'm kind of laying the groundwork for what the world was like and where we've come to, because when we start thinking about how we want to grow our business, and by we, I mean spiritual people, intuitive women, like anybody with witchy work, anything in the mystical and metaphysical. Those are the official words for what we do. By the way, anything in the woo world is, it's going to be kind of woo. Well, guess what? Woo is less listening to our intuition. And people who do mystical and metaphysical work are often connected with the non-visible world, right? The non-physical world for most of us. And when I think about trying to grow a business, I think about where we were and where we've come to, and I've learned a lot in that process. I started to lean towards doing more of like this soft, like what are the problems you're dealing with? So I learned to look at inner work. I learned to look at inner child stuff. I could hear people talking about things and I could see where they were holding themselves back. I could hear it, but I could always see the path forward. Like this was my sort of developmental process. And it took me a few years, like 4, 5, 6. I'm still kind of in that journey. But one of the things, because I see the world through business and I really love business, I have developed a lot of clarity about how traditional marketing doesn't work. And the truth is, I've never really done traditional marketing. I know what it's all about, but I don't ever really do it that way because it's really important for me that whatever you do in your business, no matter what kind of business you are, is aligned to the essence of that business. And when you do your work solo, it's super important to me that you do your work in alignment with your own soul, with your own heart, right? And if there are strategies or tactics or norms in business that are encouraging you to go outside of that, then it's wrong, period. It doesn't matter if other people have done it. And I think this is especially important for spiritual entrepreneurs. Like it's super, super important. And I actually wanted to just kind of list some of the ways that the traditional marketing stuff has really led us to undercharging for our work, okay? Because it keeps us questioning our worth. It makes us doubt ourselves. I mean, that already exists in the field, right? So let's just start with that. Like the number one thing that happens for anyone doing mystical, metaphysical, intuitive, spiritual work, we're already dealing with a culture, a society, a norm, conventional wisdom that denigrates and derides our work. So those are kind of big words, but literally we are diminished for what we do. It is hokey. It's not provable. There are all kinds of myths and stereotypes about making things up and charlatans stealing from people, like preying on people's emotions. And anyone who's done spiritual work or inner work knows it's not how it works. There are people who can do it, but often when you're connected and you're intuitive, you can't play in that world and not have it physically affect you if you are being not soul aligned, not towards highest good. You literally will attract a lot of problems. So can it happen? Yes. But for the most part, that's the impression people have. And then if you want to go back historically and you think about intuitives and witches and healers, they were really revered until they were feared, right? So it happened at the same time. Like most of the public wanted, and royalty wanted a healer or some sort of herbalist or whatever. A woman usually would show up. Shamans would also show up to help. And when they could actually create miracles, they were then feared because of the power they held. So we've always had this in our society, and that is a big thing, because think about it. That world coupled with conventional business, you take a traditional business world, this is about logic, this is about provability, it's about efficiency, it's about using thoughts to make decisions. And when you're intuitive and you're doing spiritual work, you don't make decisions from your thoughts. You're listening for something that's not showing up visibly or logically to help people grow, to take people where they want to go. So, traditional business has failed entrepreneurs who are intuitive and spiritual because it appeals to your mind and expects you to do things mentally. And then what happens is you end up with too many ideas in your head and you question yourself. You question all this mental ideas. So you question the apps you should use. You question the way you should sell. You question whether or not your course is good enough or program or coaching is good enough. Like you end up questioning because there's so much mental expectation. A lot of business expects that growth comes through doing more. So there's another one where we get kind of drained from what we do, that you can grow through doing more. When we know from a spiritual capacity that growth is non-linear, it happens when you line yourself up and then things appear, right? Then opportunities present themselves, you meet people. It has to do with an inner thing in terms of how growth happens for anyone, actually. The other thing about conventional and standard business is that it has historically been a zero-sum game. So by that, what I mean is, in business, one person wins and one person loses. And there's a lot of new business work being done about how we can all benefit, so triple bottom line and some of the stuff that B Corps are doing. But conventional business still holds this. There's a lot about a zero-sum game, and that there's not enough to go around. So you can learn this a lot in sales, right? Sales is very much about, we need to get people in the door, because if I lose this person, then there's nobody that's coming. There's always this sense of limitation or not enough, and so we have to compete. And again, that doesn't ring true for us spiritually, and while we may not have had the logic to understand why, it certainly didn't feel good, which is why a lot of people say, I don't want to do selling, right? Because sales implies someone loses almost in every instance. The other thing about business is that logic and efficiency are always prioritized. And if you notice, shows up in social media, it shows up in marketing, it shows up in the way you do your pricing. Like, all of these things come down to logic and efficiency. You make a plan based on logic. If I sell this, then I can logically go to this. And how can I make my program more efficient, when maybe that's not the goal of the work that you do? But then you question yourself and are told that the way you're structuring your programs are not going to help you grow your business the way you want to grow it or get you to the income that you want. Again, these are all fallacies, but they are part of what we wrestle with on a regular basis as a spiritual entrepreneur trying to create a successful business, right? It just happens. And then the big one that I think is like game changer is that business, pay attention to any marketing plan, pay attention to any product growth, any sales, anything in business. It is always linear. It is always linear. You have to do step A to get to step B, to get to step C, to get to step D. So you have to grow this way to do this. So before you can do these programs, you have to do these. Before you can do group coaching, you really need to do one-on-one coaching. Pick a way that you have been told you have to follow a plan. You have to follow a plan. A lot of this shows up in funnels as well, like you get a freebie to go this direction, to go this direction. Some of this can make common sense, but when everything is perceived as linear and when you're not following steps, then when you don't follow the steps, you're wrong. That's number one. That's what business tells us. But here's number two. As a spiritual entrepreneur, you know that life is not linear. It is a multi-dimensional experience, and this is only going to get to be bigger. It is only going to be bigger with time. Yeah, you look at the Aquarian age, this is all about non-linear. If you look at the growth that we're experiencing, it's not linear, it's actually exponential. You can see this in technology, you can see the incredibly fast way that everything's moving, and things can be jumping steps because that's the way time is moving. So these are all the things I've discovered on my journey to figure out how to get to a place where we can create sustainable businesses as spiritual entrepreneurs, as intuitives, as healers. And there wasn't a roadmap. There has never been a roadmap for us. So maybe we follow the roadmap for coaches, or maybe we follow the roadmap for healing professionals, or maybe we follow the roadmap for course creators or creatives. Like, we're all trying to find a roadmap that gets shared in the online worlds as to which one might be closest for us, right? Which one might work for us. But the truth is, you bring in something that is still beyond all of that. You bring in your intuition. You bring in that knowing that you follow. You bring in the way that you do your work. You could do energy work. You could be listening at a different level. so that you already realize that you access a different version of information than the thought and traditional information. So when we have that going on, all of these situations don't always feel correct. I even feel that today when I work with somebody who's helping me with my business. If they aren't already highly intuitive or have worked in this space, they don't quite get the connection. So I did end up getting really fortunate and found a path forward. So what I found as my shortcut to staying in alignment, what I discovered that really kind of changed the game for me was human design. So I did learn I was intuitive and started to pay attention to it more. That was a big deal. And I had always been listening to my sense that things were correct or not correct, but there was a point where I was spinning because I have a very strong mind and I like information. And I kept being given a sense that I needed to focus on authority. And when I went back to looking, I went to the internet like we all do and looked up, well, what does that exactly mean? It brought me to human design. And it's not the first time I'd come across human design. I'd actually been told for several years I might want to look into it. And the one time I did, I was like, oh, hell no, this is too much. It's one of the reasons I've never gotten fully into astrology either. Like there's just too many pieces. I need something more focused. And when I actually picked up human design and I paid attention to what it was actually telling me, it changed the game. Because what it does is it gives me a guidepost for listening to my own intuition through my own physical experience. So it helps me stay in alignment with universal flow. So let's say stay in alignment with my soul, with my divine plan, by paying attention to certain things as they relate to my own physical body and the way I like to live in this lifetime. So it can take me out of the ethers and bring me into a knowing. So I can know how I'm designed to create, and I know how I'm designed to make decisions, and I know kind of the way that I like to operate. And the basics of human design sort of transformed everything for me. And as soon as I introduced that into my work, it was really easy for me to focus my intuition. Like some people use tarot, some people use astrology, some people have completely other different ways, meditation, shamanism, altered states. Like we all have a way. But for me, human design made it very simple because I can get something concrete for each person and then craft the solution forward. So this has emerged after working with hundreds of people. I have done so many human design charts for people because it's a default thing that I do, but I can almost always pinpoint the core pieces of where people are selling themselves short, where they're naturally inclined to get caught up. And it helps with creating income because you can see where you get stuck and you can see where you can open the door more easily. It's really phenomenal. It is possible. That's one of the things that I think we forget because as a spiritual entrepreneur, one of the things that I have heard most commonly from my people, there's a lot of them, but one of the ones is, well, I don't think that now is the good time to do this because I don't feel it. I don't feel good about it. And that's probably one of the most common blocks that I see to creating consistency and momentum in business. And human design helps us see the way around that and in what ways we can leverage how we naturally are to get beyond that I'm not feeling it. Because it happens pretty consistently. Like even for me still today, I will get to a place of like, oh, this doesn't resonate with me now. I don't feel like I have the energy. Does it make sense for me to send this newsletter? Does it make sense? And when I have a different metric to use for how to make some decisions rather than defaulting to like the down energy of Mars and retrograde, it helps keep momentum and keep flow and not create judgment, self-judgment, basically, judging myself for not following through. So I really wanted to share that with everyone because I think it's important to know there are pathways forward in marketing. There are pathways forward in business. There are pathways forward in creating income as a spiritual entrepreneur that work, that honor the intuitive. And you can create something unique to yourself that works. I have seen multiple clients come in thinking they wanted to create more income and sustainable income, and that certainly was true. But one of the key components that was really important that they realized in the process of working towards that was that they wanted to have more comfort and control in their business because it scared them. Like, there's these interesting things that open up, right? What I wanted to leave you with is, as you think about your journey to creating consistent income, financial success, business success, is that you can trust your intuition. It works. And when you get stuck, you can look to human design because it's a really solid solution, and you can find multiple other options. There's always another option, and if it doesn't feel correct, then there's something waiting for you to be found. I want to close today by saying I got really inspired yesterday when I was scheduling all this, and I went ahead and scheduled for Saturday, which is unusual. I scheduled a free human design talk to literally break down the different components of human design that relate to business and translate it so that you can understand it as a spiritual entrepreneur and how it addresses the specific issues you encounter when you're trying to figure out how to price your work and figure out how to do business in a way that's aligned. So thank you for listening. I'll post the link below and would love to have you join me for my next live. So I'll post it up when I know the date. Take care.